Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asad Abdul Hamid. I am a graduate student studying engineering management here at Rutgers University, and I am joined by my co-host.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cassie Oguanu, and I am currently a senior at Rutgers studying electrical computer engineering with a minor in entrepreneurship.
And today we are here to talk with you about entrepreneurship as an engineer. To lead us in this discussion, we have a panel of seasoned entrepreneurs and industry professionals that are going to share their wealth of knowledge with us today. We're going to give them an opportunity to introduce them to you and answer an icebreaker question. For the audience in the chat, please feel free to answer along if this applies to you. So, the icebreaker question is, what class did you struggle with most during your undergraduate education? Please tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself, and how your experience is relevant to this discussion, and then answer the icebreaker. We'll start with Mr. Ogu.
All right, really excited to be on the call today. My name is Emeka Ogu, Rutgers School of Engineering, electrical engineering class of 2005. I come from a Rutgers family. Both parents went to Rutgers. My sisters went to Rutgers. My wife went to Rutgers, also School of Engineering. I am the founder and CEO of PeopleJoy, where we're helping solve the $1.6 trillion student loan crisis. Relevant for anybody on this call who got student loans from undergrad or graduate school. Between my wife and I, we had 400,000 student loans. My toughest class, I would say, freshman year statics. That class, just for whatever reason, I couldn't get it. Couldn't do it. It's still I would say that was probably my toughest class. Second would be XBOS. I got a couple MPs before I finally figured out the system there. But statics would be the toughest one for me freshman year.
Thank you very much for your response, and we are very happy to have you here. That right-hand rule can be tricky. Got to stay on top of that. Dr. Robinson, we'll go to you next.
All right. Hello, everybody. I'm Jeff Robinson, and I'm a 1995 graduate in the civil engineering department at the Rutgers School of Engineering. A long time ago. Well, I have been on faculty here at Rutgers University for the last 13 years, but there's a long path between graduating from Rutgers and getting an appointment as a faculty member in entrepreneurship. Part of it has to do with a story of entrepreneurship, which I hope I get a chance to tell you a bit more about later on. And a part of it has to also do with teaching entrepreneurship. And so I will give you some perspective, hopefully, today on what you can and can't do, or what you should and shouldn't do, and what pathways you can take. My hardest class when I was a Rutgers School of Engineering undergraduate student in civil engineering was reinforced concrete. Dr. Nolly. Very hard class. I did not survive that class. I had to figure out how to take that class somewhere else. But that class, I can still remember a whole lot of things about concrete because of it, nightmares that I have. But that's another story.
Thank you for that response, Dr. Robinson. Very happy to have you here, and glad to see that you were able to persevere through the challenge of learning about concrete.
That's right.
Finally, we have Dr. Pinkett.
Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to the webinar. It's good to see everyone, and I'm excited for the conversation. I am one of the co-founders and the chairman and CEO of BCT Partners. We're celebrating 22 years in business at BCT. You'll learn more about the story, but I will preface it by saying the company was founded with three of my Rutgers classmates, one of them being Dr. Robinson, although he's wearing his professorial hat today, in addition to his entrepreneurial hat today, which he both wears very well. We'll talk more about BCT, but I'm 28 years as an entrepreneur now. We started when we were students at Rutgers out of our dormitory, and we violated every rule about not running a business out of your dorm. And we can say that now with pride. But nevertheless, we've had a tremendous journey and a tremendous opportunity as entrepreneurs, beginning as engineering students at Rutgers. I was a class of 1994 electrical engineering from the School of Engineering. And my two most difficult classes, piggybacking off of Brother Emeka's two classes. One was expository writing. I did not do as much writing leading up to that class as I perhaps should have, and so the volume of writing I had to get up the learning curve. But the second class for me was Principles of Electrical Engineering, and it was my first double E course. And I remember I had a habit. Dr. Robinson may remember this, but I had a lot of study tips. One of my habits was to start with the easiest question first, to ease my way into a test. And I remember getting my first test for principles and going through the test looking for an easy question. I'm like, I can't find it. There's no easy question. So I took some hits, as we would call them back then, lumps, on some of those early tests, but I figured it out. And I'm a better man, a better Rutgers grad because of it.
Thank you very much for sharing, Dr. Pinkett. We are so excited to have your perspective and the unique journeys and perspective of all of our panelists and the wisdom you've gained over your experience with entrepreneurship. I will say that I am a bit jealous, but also impressed by all the ECE that we're seeing here today. You know, some Meki representation would be nice every once in a while.
Excited. I'm glad to see that I'm represented through the panel.
That's the E right there. That's right.
Exactly.
Very good. Well, without further ado, Cassie, if you'd like to start us off.
Of course. So going into the first section of questions, we're going to be talking about the broader strokes of starting a business, starting off with what made you pursue entrepreneurship? What sparked that interest to begin with?
Yeah, so I'll jump in first because it begins the story. Y'all going to hear a lot about our story, so put on your seatbelts. We had a classmate who was president of the Minority Engineering Educational Task, MEET, which is the Rutgers chapter of the National Society of Black Engineers. No doubt, Wakanda forever. That's how we get down. And the president then was a gentleman named Wayne Abbott. Wayne Abbott is like, he's like Morpheus to the Matrix. He's like Yoda to Star Wars. I mean, he was our president, but it just so happens Wayne and I grew up in the same neighborhood and went to the same high school and grade school. He was 2 years ahead of me. So when Wayne was a senior and we were in our second year, Wayne started a business, designing and selling Afrocentric t-shirts. And this was during the 1990s when that was part of a whole social consciousness movement. Hip hop was just really coming of age around the 90s. This thing called Black Expo was spawning up around the country, selling Afrocentric jewelry, t-shirts, hats, attire, playing cards. And Wayne starting a business as a student inspired an entire wave of students that were younger than him to start businesses. And I look back on my years at Rutgers, while Jeffrey, Lawrence, Dallas, and I started the business together, I can reel off other students, Anthony Emmanuel, Dawit Lasanu, all who also started separate businesses, I would argue, and Dr. Robinson can weigh in later, inspired by Wayne's example. And the soundbite here is sometimes you got to see an entrepreneur to be an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. I just want to piggyback off that. And I think for me, my first time seeing an entrepreneur was seeing, Dr. Pinkett and Dr. Robinson. These were the GOATs when I was in school and being able to see what they did. And I remember Dean Brown and Meet, and we were always told about just the amazing things that they did. I took the path of, I was an entrepreneur, meaning that I went out of school. The first thing I wanted to do was get paid. Right? I just wanted to work in corporate America and get a job. And I think that was something that we all just wanted coming into school. But I was an entrepreneur, meaning that when I was working, I started my career at Merrill Lynch. I was always looking for opportunities to create new projects and new ideas and bring them into the company. And I was also exposed to other startups that the company worked with. And then I was seeing these startups get acquired by Microsoft, get IPO, and it started to see like, wow, you can actually build something, create value to a business, and then get acquired. And actually to see that, but I still wasn't quite ready to do my own thing yet. I didn't know what I wanted to do. So, and then I also didn't understand the financial side of the business, the financial side of starting a business. I knew how to build something, but the financial piece of it was something that I felt I needed to learn. So I actually went back to business school to get an MBA. After business school, I worked for another entrepreneur. And to Dr. Pinkett's point of it takes one to know one, when I actually got to be in that environment and see these entrepreneurs, see what they do, see how they raise capital, see how they sell, see how they hire, see how they recruit, see everything in between, it then gave me the confidence to take a leap of faith and become an entrepreneur myself.
Yeah, and the only thing I'd add to what was already said about seeing entrepreneurs is sometimes you get to see some entrepreneurs in your family. My grandmother had her own upholstery business going back into the 1980s when I was a kid, and I would see her. And the thing that impressed me about what she did was there was two things that impressed me. One is that she hired family members and other people to do the work. So she had her own store and shop up in Newburgh, New York, and I could see her, maneuvering and doing what she needed to do to make that business happen. And then on top of that, she could have a vacation when she could make it happen. She could take time to spend with her grandchildren, like me. She had some flexibility that I didn't see my other relatives who were working in corporate have. So. And it turned out there was something that she loved to do. So that impressed me. I always knew entrepreneurship was a way to go. It wasn't the only way to go, but it was an option, and it had some flexibility and autonomy attached to it that we were working in a corporation didn't have.
Thank you so much for all those answers. And you can see the 3 different paths that you all took and how it guided you to entrepreneurship. So it's really interesting to see. And of course, we have to acknowledge, with me and Assad being current Meet members, it's so amazing to have all 3 of you here and have that precedent set. So thank you once again. It's an honor.
Yeah, and I'll just add another interesting statistic or factoid, which ties together what we just discussed. If you ask what's the number one predictor of whether you'll start a business, it's not your race or ethnicity. It's not your age. It's not your education level. It's not even your income or net worth. The number one predictor of whether you will start a business is if you had parents who owned a business. That's the highest likelihood that you will start a business.
Oh, wow. That is interesting to hear.
Yeah. It says a lot about not only seeing an entrepreneur, but also normalizing and personalizing an entrepreneur. Like, you see it every day. You wake up and mom or dad is grinding, and so you just, by osmosis, it just rubs off.
Yeah, it's easier to think something is attainable if it's right in front of you, right?
That's exactly right.
Bringing me into my next question, when you started your business, what were goals that you had for yourself as well as your business moving forward?
I'm gonna start with an aside, which was one of our goals was just to be able to earn some extra money and take a lady out to someplace other than McDonald's.
Well, McDonald's was extravagant. I'm thinking other than the dining hall. Other than the Bush dining hall.
And we accomplished that goal. Yes, we did.
Mark it off for sure.
In the very beginning, when Randall and I were in the dorms, we were all working on sort of different things. We were some of us, me in particular, were working on workshops that would be appropriate for high school students who were interested in college but didn't know any way to get there. And so part of the entity I was working on was it was doing these educational services, educational workshops. We had roommates who were really good at selling things. And so they were like, yeah, we can come up with a way to sell CDs, records, and tapes on campus. We can fund some of that. I don't know that all that came together until Randall kind of brought us all together and made us start to think about how the pieces could be put together to create one company that not only had this social mission of let's go to urban high schools and talk about college and college preparation and those kind of things, but a way to actually fund it so that we could have prizes to keep the kids interested, or to get there, to have the gas money for our old our old cars, so that we could get from place to place, and do these workshops. So at that point, the goal was, we love doing these workshops, but it costs money to do it. So what's a way to fund that? And again, remember, this is back in the 90s. CDs, records, and tapes. All the students that I teach these days have no idea what I'm talking about, right? Because music is easy to get. Whatever music you want to listen to, you can just literally go on your phone or some other device and punch it up.
Extremely accessible.
Yeah, it's completely accessible, and that wasn't the case in the 1990s. If somebody wanted to have music that they wanted to hear, they had to wait to either hear it on the radio and record it off of the radio. Well, remember that. Or they had to, wait for it to come into a record store. Well, we provided a third option. Third option was to order the catalog, and we had this next day service. And the next day service was Randall ordering it on Monday night, and then we would deliver it to you in the dining hall on Tuesday evening. That was next day service, and that was for us just amazing that people would actually buy stuff from us, and that we could use the profits to do the other work in the educational service. So that was the essence of the business. Now, people say, well, what was the name of the business? The name of the business was Mind, Body, and Soul Enterprises. And our president and CEO there was Dr. Pinkett. What did I miss in that story you want to add to it?
I think you hit on all the key themes there. I think among the takeaways, we've always, across our entrepreneurial careers, and I see it also in Brother Emeka and his work as well, have been our goal has been the double bottom line. It's been making a profit and making a difference. It's been kind of earning a financial return and earning a social return. So we weren't just about the money. In fact, quite frankly, early on, we didn't really make a lot in terms of profit, because we were putting it back into the business in order to help the business grow. So we weren't cashing out per se. But that model of selling CDs to fund high school outreach is metaphoric, as you'll learn more about our journey. And so the goal, to answer your question directly, Kasi, was really just those two things: was to generate wealth, and for us that didn't take much for us to consider it wealth, and to make a difference. And we've always been guided by those two goals.
And just hearing from your entrepreneurial start, social impact has always been a fabric of the business. So it's kind of cool to see how that progressed. And Mr. Ogu, if you could weigh in on your beginning and the goals that you had for your business as well.
Yeah. So People's Choice is actually the third startup I've been a part of, second of my own. So going back to the first startup I started, it was a mobile app publishing company, and I had just gotten married. I had a nice job in New York City, and I took a leap of faith, and I quit. My wife was in medical school, right? So my thing was, don't run out of money. Like, this can't fail because she's not working. I have to make this work. And I had started as a side hustle while I was working for another company. So I had some confidence that it could generate revenue, but it was by no means profitable. And so the first few months was just, I've got to get this thing going to a point where I don't run out of my savings, and we're not out on the street. So there was that pressure to just get to product market fit as quickly as possible, to essentially generate enough income where that wasn't the case. And then after that, there's always just, startups are in stages. And the next stage is, okay, how do we scale this thing? And then you get to a point where it's growing enough revenue where you can bring people in so you can scale even faster. So it got through different stages, but I remember that first feeling of just like, I'm on my own and I've got to make this work. And you start thinking about things like health insurance and just things that you just take for granted when you're working for someone else. But these are things, what if I get hit by a bus and I don't have health insurance? And so having to think through all those things came to mind. So it was definitely nerve-wracking, but I think what worked for me was just having people, like-minded people around me who'd done it, who've gone through different stages of it, and we were just able to reassure each other. Everybody will tell you being an entrepreneur is lonely. It absolutely is, but I think surrounding yourself with other entrepreneurs who've taken that risk and have going through it definitely helps push you through. Just like engineering, right? When you're studying engineering and you're going through those classes, having those study buddies at ARC and CERC who can commiserate with you is what helps you get through it. So that's what helped me get through that initial challenge.
Of course. And I think what you all have expressed is entrepreneurship can be a very enriching opportunity, but in the first legs of it, it's definitely a struggle. And oftentimes you have to have that mentality of there is only up because the alternative isn't too pretty. So thank you for expressing that. And I wanted to specifically talk about kind of how you set yourselves apart within your business. So how did you identify your unique value proposition, and has it stayed the same until today? So for context for the audience, value proposition summarizes why a customer would choose your product or service. It essentially communicates the clear benefits that customers receive by giving you their business, essentially. So if anyone could weigh in.
Well, so let me start on that, because then it'll let me tell a little bit more of the story. The first business, which really was the first iteration of the business, had all these components to it, what I described before, with the record CDs and tapes and then educational services. Well, the way I like to tell the story is, we got pretty good at doing the educational services, and people wanted us for that. And it was actually starting to make some money, more money than selling CDs, records, and tapes. So we didn't have to do that anymore. And there's some circumstances that happened that gave us more visibility. Specifically, when now Dr. Pinkett received the Rhodes Scholarship, people were always asking him to come and speak places, and he was gracious enough to say, "Well, you need to have my whole team come," and then we would all show up. We would do some workshops, and people liked that, and we got a good reputation for it. So the unique value proposition were that we were young, upwardly mobile college students, people who had either at that stage, a couple of us had just graduated and a couple of us were still in school. And it was unique because there wasn't a whole lot of other, motivational / educational speakers out there who could bring some of the workshops that we were doing at that time to school districts. And eventually it was to internship programs. And, after that, there were nonprofit organizations and corporations who were looking for people who could connect with this. At that point, it was Generation X. How do you connect with Generation X? Every generation, the same question, right? How do we connect across these different generations? And who do we bring in that has relevance to them to make it a message stick? And for us, that was our unique value proposition. We had, the name of the business changes at that point. It's MBS Educational Services and Training. And that company had something that other companies weren't doing. And that held us for a while. The challenge with unique value propositions is at some point, they may not be unique anymore. And then you gotta shift and move and pivot, but that's another part of the story. Something to think about.
Well, I'll take the baton on that and continue with the story there, Dr. Robinson. And I remember in business school, we read a case study. Dr. Robinson, being a business school professor, appreciates case studies. And it was about an automotive manufacturer. But the lesson from the case study was every time they introduced a new innovation, power windows, power brakes, like the competition caught up. So unique value proposition, competitive advantage is not lasting. It is temporary. I don't care how unique or competitive the advantage is. It is temporary, and eventually the competition will not just catch up. They'll leapfrog you if you don't mind your cheese, because the cheese is going to move. And so to that point, 9/11, which we just celebrated the anniversary of 9/11, was the death of MBS Educational Services and Training. You can imagine, as we are in this pandemic, 9/11 caused people to stop traveling completely. And our business was predicated on travel, events, conferences, symposia. And so in the 30 days after 9/11, we just got phone call after phone call after phone call from clients saying events are canceled, events are canceled, events are canceled. And we were at the crossroads of trying to decide, will we go get full-time jobs? Brother Emeka reminds me of one of my favorite acronyms of entrepreneurship, EENASWASI. See how I remembered that? He's going to laugh when I say this. Every entrepreneur needs a spouse with a steady income. and we were young. We ain't have that. We ain't have it yet. Dr. Robinson knows what I'm talking about. That didn't come till later. So we got to decide, what are we going to do? Go get a job? One of us get a job, part-time job, go back to corporate, or go into corporate for that matter. Fortunately, we had been toying around with this idea, which is going to sound real novel. What if we used our engineering education? Whoa, what a mind-blowing idea.
Riveting, yes.
And so we conjured up this idea of moving into IT, and also looking at the intersection of IT and communities, and how we could begin thinking about improving communities by not only bringing technology, but also leveraging our engineering rigor as a way of thinking about how to solve social problems. And so the ashes of MBS Educational Services and Training became the burgeoning light of what was originally called Building Community Technology Partners. Building Community Technology Partners. Now, we'll get to parts of the story later, because it eventually became BCT Partners, but the origins of BCT are literally January of 2002, which is 3 months and some change after 9/11, when MBS was rendered a failure.
I just love how we're progressively learning more and more of the story as this unfolds. Looking forward to more. But Mr. Ogu, if you could weigh in.
Yeah, I think, both doctors covered a lot of what I would like to say. I mean, to Dr. Pinkett's point, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And unique selling proposition is just that, selling. If your proposition isn't selling, it's not unique. You have to change it. And so, for us, what we do is we sell an employee benefit. Now, employee benefits are designed for the employee, but we sell them to the employer. Their value proposition is this employee benefit will help me to attract and retain talent in a very competitive marketplace. And so our double bottom line is we're going to help your employees get out of debt faster, pursue financial freedom, essentially pursue happiness, which is hence the name People Joy. It's really designed to that end point of we want to help people become debt-free so they can live their best lives, be their best selves. And so our unique selling proposition, as Dr. Pinkett and Dr. Robinson mentioned, was also forged through fire. When we initially launched our first product with student loan repayment assistance, it was designed for employers to help make a matching contribution to their employee student loans, which is great during a bull market and employers have $3 to do such a thing, but not so much in a bear market. And so we had a situation where we actually had to add a voluntary product where it was employee paid. And that actually became the product that actually became our highest revenue generator. But that came from having to try a couple different things, kiss a couple frogs before we actually were able to figure out what we did. And our unique selling proposition now, to Dr. Pink's point, because competition has come in, is we go that extra mile. Where some of our competition is more focused on purely AI, we provide AI plus human component, because we know when it comes to financial wellness and education, sometimes people just feel comfortable talking to an individual. And that's really that bridge between AI, the engineering piece of what we've built. I call our software TurboTax for student loans, but also connecting it with the human element is our unique selling proposition.
For sure. Thank you for your response. And from all of the panelists, it's very apparent that if you are trying to be an entrepreneur, you have to be resilient. There's no way around it, because there's so many different things that will come at you that are so unexpected that you just have to have the spirit of trying in order to keep it going. Which brings me into my next point of, when did you know that your business was sustainable long term? Kind of one of those bright lights throughout your journey.
Yeah, I would actually say that I don't know if there is such thing as a sustainable business. I got some head nods on that from the pews, and what I might say is that there are businesses that are sustainable by reinventing their business, and in that regard, they're not the same business. They're evolving, they're adapting, because the market changes, circumstances change. We'll talk about COVID and pivot and the like. And even as we talk about BCT, or building community technology partners, as it was originally founded, there's probably been 4 iterations of what we call now BCT partners, starting out with this idea of technology and communities. And then realizing that technology is just a tool, and that to build communities, you need to build people and build organizations. So we got rid of the building community technology partners with the BCT partners. And then we realized that just building people, organizations, and technology is not necessarily unique. Lots of people are doing that. So now we're like, we need to figure out something that gives us greater differentiation. And interesting from Brother Emeka's comments, now let's bring in analytics. Let's bring in machine learning. Let's bring in natural language processing. Let's now combine sophisticated data science with technology, with this idea of community. And that intersection of the 3, kind of organizational development, the insights that data science provides, and the innovation that technology is able to infuse, that's the unique current value proposition for BCT partners. And so Andy Grove, who was the founder of Intel, wrote a book. I don't remember the name, but I remember, people don't remember what you said, but how it made you feel. I know what it made me feel. It made me feel paranoid, because the message from the book was, if you're an entrepreneur and you are not paranoid, then you are losing ground to the competition. You're going to be constantly worrying about what the competition is doing. Don't believe me? Ask Blockbuster Video. Don't believe me? Ask the entire taxi cab industry. Don't believe me? Ask Circuit Cities. Some of you are thinking, who is Circuit City? That's my point.
And that was an interesting point you made, the fact that no business is inherently sustainable. You always have to keep on innovating and keeping in mind how your competitors impact your business and vice versa. So a question I would like to pose to the panel off of that is, do you feel like entrepreneurship is insatiable, that you are kind of never finding contentment within your business, or is it manufactured in a different way?
That's a good question for Mr. Ogu.
I'll potato that to someone else. Let me see if I can answer that. So can you just repeat it again? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, for sure. So I was asking, do you feel like inherently entrepreneurship is insatiable? You're always trying to chase after the next thing, keep up with competitors, not necessarily looking for contentment within the area of business you're working in?
So I think that, entrepreneurship is really about pursuing a passion, right? And I think that you can be an entrepreneur by starting a business, you can be an entrepreneur by just within a business. So one of the best pieces of advice one of my managers gave to me when I was working on Wall Street was treat your job like a CEO, right? Your manager, your peers, the people you work with, they are your customers, right? If you don't respond, if you don't manage your business, if you're not accountable to them, then your business, your brand will suffer. So I felt like I was always an entrepreneur, even just by the way I sort of carried that. But to me, I think the important thing is you talk about insatiable. It's about finding your why. If you are passionate about what you're doing and it's internal, it's insatiable because you're always going to want the best for that business. The same way parents want the best for their kids, right? That's always going to be insatiable. If you're going into it for the wrong reasons, right, to just make money because you think it's going to be an IPO, because you think this is the hot flavor of the month and everybody's talking about it, and you think you might raise some money, I think that unless you get a quick exit, you're going to get burnt out because any business is going to have ups and downs. It's going to have curveballs, and so I think finding your why is super important. And so for me, how I did that, and I'm going to say this because the first business that I started, the first startup, the mobile app publishing business, was just about the money. Like I thought it was hot. I was jumping into it and I made money, but I wasn't happy because the core business that I was building, I wasn't passionate about. And so when the going got rough, at times it was like, why am I doing this? My current business is something that I've already shared my story, the $400,000 in student loans and where I started with is something that I dream about this. I spoke at the Department of Education over the summer to talk about what they can do to change it, even though their changes could negatively impact my business. I don't care. I want this thing solved, right? And that's just something that just came from, this is just something I really care about. I really care about financial wellness, literacy. I came from very humble beginnings, started working after 8th grade. I bought a savings bond with my first paycheck. So understanding the compounding interest and the value of that, anybody who knows me can tell you Mecca's always the guy who's always thinking about investing and things like that. So it's just something I can talk about all day. If I wasn't doing this here, I'd probably be doing it for someone else, right? And I think when you find that, it is insatiable. And my wife balances me. She makes sure that I don't go too far off the deep end, and otherwise I'd be working nonstop. And you do have to have people around you to have balance. I had a health scare going into this a while, well, maybe later in the conversation, but like you can go off the deep end in this, and you have to figure out how to rein yourself back in. But when you're passionate about something, it's like you don't want to stop, to answer your question.
And let me just underscore that. Passion helps you. Being passionate about the subject or the area of your entrepreneurship will help you get through some tough times. If you know your why, as Emeka was just saying, that's your motivation for continuing on, even when it's difficult. So, it's interesting the way you phrased it, Cassie, insatiable. Entrepreneurs are creative. We know that. Mm-hmm. But people also think of entrepreneurs as being resourceful, right? And resilient. And because there are so many opportunities to evaluate what the competition is and to make pivots and changes and to be observant, you often have to be resourceful and resilient. They're even courageous, right? You got to think about it. That's where people always ask me, what's it take to be an entrepreneur? Well, I think those are the things that it takes, because that helps you to work harder, to stay up late, to make a difference in whatever it is that you're doing, and to do it in ways that maybe working for somebody else you wouldn't be as motivated to do. So that's, I think, what separates these people who are doing entrepreneurship. I say these people like I'm not one, but when I'm talking to my students, I'm saying that, a lot of you say you want to work for yourself, but you haven't figured out what you want to work for yourself on or right. for. And when you figure that out, then it'd be much easier for you to determine what your entrepreneurship is going to be about.
Yeah. I think you guys are making some fundamental foundational points here about what it means to be an entrepreneur. Let me say it right now. This is one of the hardest jobs on the planet. And I've seen hard. This is one of the hardest jobs on the planet. And which means if you don't have the passion, don't bother. Like no passion, no point, no passion, no purpose, no passion, no pursuit. And I'll give an example outside of entrepreneurship, but it drives the message home and it penetrates right to the bone. Dr. Robinson, our last book that we wrote together was Black Faces in White Places, where we interviewed dozens of successful African Americans. And we came across a study that compared minorities who become executives to minorities who plateau in their careers. And if you compare the two groups, listen closely, minorities who plateau have more promotions than those who reach the top. Let me say that conversely. The minorities who become executives have fewer promotions than those who plateau, who hit a wall, who are limited at the mid-managerial level. Now that's counterintuitive. If I asked you off the street who has more promotions, you say the executives have more promotions. Of course they do. Well, they don't. Now, how do you reconcile that? So one of the people we interviewed was Don Thompson, former engineer, former NSBE member, became president and CEO of McDonald's. Tweet that. And so we interviewed Don Thompson, and in the interview, I'm paraphrasing, he basically says, throughout my career, I've been given all these opportunities to be promoted, but if the opportunity didn't tap into my passion, I declined. You follow? So the executives were more discerning to say, do I bring passion to the position? If not, no, thank you. I'm good. But if I see the passion in the position, give it to me. Why? Because when I bring my best self, I do my best work and I shine my brightest light and I am my best self. The same thing applies to entrepreneurship. Why in the world would I pursue a venture if I don't have passion for it? Here's the answer. I don't. I don't.
Simple.
I learned that lesson, and the brother just made that point and just punctuated it.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And I feel like even in my conversations with Assad regularly, I feel like we talk about that another value proposition is uniquely yourself. If the passion that you're bringing to a certain topic is there, it's going to guide you through, it's going to keep you motivated, it's going to make you resourceful, finding the things you need in order to make it happen. So I think that's a great point that you made. And thank you so much for your response.
What I hope people don't take away from this is, don't take away from this that you go off, pursue your passion, and it's all fun. It's all fun.
There are hard times. There are hard times.
There are going to be times where you're doing stuff you don't want to do, you don't like to do, you never like doing, and you have no passion for. Mm-hmm. Passion has to be the guiding light.
Yeah.
Directionally. That's the lesson.
For sure. Thank you so much for your responses, everyone. Does anyone else want to add any closing remarks for starting a business?
All right.
Stay the course.
All right.
And I was just going to add, like, especially so it also depends on the type of business, right? So enterprise versus direct to consumer, we can go into that a little bit. But like, if you're selling an enterprise, which we do, that passion goes again towards those first sales, because you have to understand on the other side of the coin, they're looking at you like a risk, and their biggest fear for you selling your product is that they lose their jobs if you fall on your face, right? That they lose their job. And so having that passion, sometimes people are betting on you, the person. And so they might say, I'm sure early at PeopleJoy, a lot of our customers were saying, I don't know about this company, I don't know if they're going to be around, but this crazy guy keeps talking about student debt, he won't stop. And like, I'm just going to take a flyer on him because there's something about him that shows me he won't quit. And that's what gets you through those first early sales, because you don't have a presence yet. You haven't built a brand. You're still building that. And so it's super important to just be authentic and have that show when you're selling, beyond just having a good product. You have to actually sell it at the end of the day.
Thank you, Mr. Ogu, for that tidbit. All right.
Certainly appreciated the responses on that section. And one of those closing remarks from Dr. Pinkett really reminded me of something my parents always told me growing up. Sometimes you have to do what you have to do so that you can do what you want to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that's something we all could take away from those amazing responses. Moving on into this next section, we're going to be talking about transferable skills. And I really want to get into the heart of the matter for this section right away. because I believe there's going to be some good responses for it. And I'm definitely excited about moving into one of our later sections because we have an audience question that it's going to be relevant to. But for right now, the question for transferable skills. You all have formal educations in engineering. And yet, from what we've heard about your businesses so far, the focus of your businesses, the end point of them, they are not explicitly related to engineering. They're not specifically engineering based. So the question is about how did you decide to branch into this non-traditional engineering business, non-traditional endpoint for engineering education, running your businesses, and how has your engineering education helped you to do that?
Well, so let me start on that one there. First of all, everybody who is an engineering alum knows that the engineering educational process is challenging, right? So you learn how to work hard. You learn how to study. You learn how to get things done in a short period of time. That's invaluable for anything you're going to do. Furthermore, problem solving. That's what engineers do. So there are certainly specialties in engineering that you can take those specialties and run with them. I worked for a period of time as a project manager doing civil engineering construction projects. That was what I was trained for. But the skills that I had were also transferable, as you said, to other things. So there are lots of engineers who become entrepreneurs. Some of them are in their engineering field. Some are in STEM, sort of broader areas of STEM, other crossover fields, some kind of technology or scientific endeavor that they find an application for and use that as their sort of their entrepreneurship. And then others realize that those same skills can be used and applied for all kinds of businesses because the thought process of being an engineer is really. So it doesn't surprise me that when we have engineers who shift over to entrepreneurship and aren't necessarily doing something that is directly technical. But the reality is there's lots of technology in any kind of business these days, and just having a technical background is an advantage. So you're never far from being an engineer. If you did the curriculum and you finished, you got that inside of you. And whether you apply that problem-solving skill and talent, those skills to entrepreneurship or business or other things, you're still an engineer.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the most transferable skill from engineering is solving problems. Think about every class, every problem set. They call it a problem set because you're solving a set of problems. It's just constantly trying to figure out how to bring a solution. And that's what I loved about engineering education is that it's very solutions oriented. It's not discrete as far as just science, but we know science is one of the foundations of engineering, but not the only foundation. It's about integration. It's about cross-pollination. It's about solving problems from a multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary set of skills, and it has served us well. Now, as you heard from the story, we started out in an area completely afield from engineering, only to then embrace engineering as a core component, not the only component to the question, but a core component of the work that we were doing. And the other thing I'd say from engineering, as far as transferable skills, I'd say is exactly what Dr. Robinson said. We live in such a technologically driven society. You can be a librarian nowadays, and you better have a mastery of technology. And so when I see others, my peers, my counterparts, struggling to get up to speed on Microsoft Teams, or to go from working in an office to working virtually, or to seeing modernization of a software application that they've just become accustomed to using for their job, and now there's a new system coming in. I'm like, I've been doing that since my days at Rutgers. That ain't nothing new. And engineering at Rutgers is what gave me the ability to solve problems and to innovate as an entrepreneur.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ogu. You have anything you'd like to add?
What they said, right?
We'll take the +1 on that one. Very much appreciate the responses there. And always, especially as a recent graduate, current graduate student of this institution myself, Cassie about to graduate, and so many of our student community here at Rutgers, we always want to know, did it work? Did the education, the experience we got here, does it work to help us be successful in the future? And it's affirming to hear that response from all of you. The next question that I want to get into is going to be audience-based, because I would like to address it before we move forward. And it is related to transferable skills, related to the kind of camaraderie that Mr. Ogu was mentioning earlier that you build in the engineering experience and what it's like to understand the team that you have around you. So this question is that it's admirable to see how close and strong the BCT leadership team has been over the years. Can any of you, and Mr. Ogu, this question still applies to you, can you share any words of wisdom in creating a strong business leadership team?
Yeah, lots. I think I know where Dr. Robinson's going to go, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. Although he has no problem stealing mine. He knows what I'm talking about. He was like, I know what Pink's going to say, so I'm going to say it before him. So I'm going to reference another literary work, "Good to Great" by Jim Collins, among my all-time favorite business books. And as the name implies, Good to Great compares good companies to great companies, not the good to the bad, but the good to the great, because good is the enemy of great. And in unearthing what defines the great companies distinguished from the good, he talks about the level 5 leader and the level 4 leader. The level 4 leader thinks what and then who. What should we be doing as a company? And who should be on our team to help us do it? And Collins describes that as a genius with 1,000 helpers. You can conjure that imagery. The level 5 leader thinks who and then what. Who should be on my team? Who should be on the bus? Who should be in the room? And only once they're in the room and on the bus do we figure out where we're going. And that is, again, in some ways counterintuitive. If you asked me before I read the book, I'd have thought the level 4 leader. But the lesson here is you want to design your strategy to your team, not your team to your strategy. So you want to be a little more flexible in terms of thinking you're such a savant and so visionary to know what the company should be doing and where it should be going, to first think about two things. This might piggyback off Dr. Robinson's comments about I predicted him accurately. They are like-minded and like-hearted. The like-minded says that we have complementary skills and abilities. You're mechanical, I'm electrical, he's civil. So we all have these different skill sets. But the like-heart means that we share some common values. Like we can get along with each other. We can argue at 5 o'clock and still be cool at 6 o'clock because we know that disagreement and conflict are part of the process of getting to innovation. And so as I look back on, quite frankly, the partners that we've maintained over 28 years and the ones that have come and gone, what's the common thread amongst the 4 of us? Like minds, like hearts.
That was powerful. Just point blank, that was powerful. Every level of that between how you organize your team and what it means to be a part of that team, how you identify those people is very, very valuable. Dr. Robinson, I believe he's alluding to some of your comments. I'm excited to see if he penned you correctly.
Hey, I was about to sit back and enjoy Mr. Ogu there, but you put me on the spot. I don't know what he's expecting me to say, but I do want to mention some names. Lawrence Hibbert, Dallas Grundy, Randall Pinkett, Jeffrey Robinson. That's the core 4 he's talking about. All engineering, graduates of Rutgers School of Engineering. That's the core 4 people usually point to as as core to what we're talking about. And the thing that I usually do say about this is we met each other as students and learned from each other as student leaders. And so there was a background of obviousness. We all knew each other. We learned each other's strengths and weaknesses, and those things came together so that by the time we were ready to start a business, those core pieces were in place. And again, we each have our strengths and we have things that we're not as strong at, and we know how to leverage those things to get things done. So that's powerful. And I'll just say it a slightly different way. Because a lot of people who think that entrepreneurship is done by single solitary sheroes and heroes, right? And that's really not true. I mean, some of the greatest companies that we make reference to were really team efforts that sometimes we see one person out front and forget that there were other people around them. Every Steve Jobs that's out there, there's a Steve Wozniak. You people know about Bill Gates, but what about Paul Allen and Steve Ballmer? There are people who are around that sort of focal person who often are making a great. It's much as we talk about teams and sports. There are entrepreneurial teams that have to get along and work together to make things happen. And I'm always encouraging my students to find a team, find those people who you can work with. It may not be the first venture that y'all do that is the best one. It may be one of the ones that come afterwards because you've learned some things from being in business together. And that collaboration is essential. One of the things that venture capitalists say is I'd rather invest in an A team with a B idea than a B team with an A idea. And that, again, speaks back to the importance of having an entrepreneurial team that works well together, because together they'll find something that works. And that will be the sort of the golden ticket to the future.
I'm here. I think Dr. Robertson hit the nail on the head. I get this question a lot from entrepreneurs or people who are about to take that leap. And it's like, Emeka, I'm so passionate about this idea. I'm ready to do it today. And my first question is like, do you have a co-founder? And oftentimes it's no, and they still want to do it. And my advice is always, don't give a damn about your idea. Get a co-founder. You want to go, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with someone else. And this is from somebody who's been a solopreneur twice, right? So I've been that guy who's just taken that passion and gone with it. And I've probably taken a couple of years off my life, like working 10 times as hard to get where I got to eventually, but I had to do it on my own. And so I'm telling you, like, this is for the birds. Like, this part of it is not, I'm real. I keep it real with people, right? Like, yes, I've been able to raise money and Macy's have invested capital in us, but it took a while. It's okay to not have that perfect partner. That's what equity investing is for, right? And you work through those things with people. You're not going to get it perfect, but it's to Dr. Robertson's point, it's better to do it with others than to do it by yourself. And it's a learning process. And I can tell you that with us, we've had staff turnover where initially, yeah, you are hiring people. As an engineer, we're doers, right? You're hiring somebody who knows how to do, and then they come in and realize they're technically competent, but there's not a good culture fit, right? And we've all been that around people who know everything at the office, and they're hard to be around. And if you don't know that person, look in the mirror, it might be you, right? But we've all been around that, right? And you know that it's not fun to be. It can be draining. It could be just draining. People are like, you don't want to meet with them. And so sometimes you just want to be around people who you just enjoy being around. And we've got to that point now, but it's taken a lot of heartache and pain to get there, and really understanding that, everybody tells you culture. And I think when you're building up a product, you're kind of rolling your eyes, culture, whatever. I'm just trying to build this product and make money. That's so important. It's really knowing that, and you have to fail a couple of times to really understand the importance of that. Have a couple of bad hires to really start appreciating the value of culture, and to what Dr. Robertson and Dr. Pinker said is spot on. It's like, is this person fit with the way I do things, with the way that we believe, with our mission statement and everything in between? Because if they don't, they could be the smartest person on the planet. They could be the best salesperson on the planet, but ultimately they'll be a cancer on your organization. Yeah. And you've just got to be super. And if you make that mistake, that's fine. But what they say is, what hire slow, fire fast. You got to be okay pulling the trigger on that as well. That's another part of entrepreneurship that we don't like talking about, but it's true. Is layoffs or letting people go. Like, that's just something that everybody will have to deal with at a certain point. And it's tough to make those decisions, but that's part of the job, unfortunately.
They say culture eats strategy for lunch, and that is true words.
Wow, thank you all for the responses on this question. So many. I really like the use of idioms. They help me remember things, I know for sure. So that last remark you ended there, tires slow, fire fast, and then the one before about, now it is escaping me, but it has to do with building the right team around you and making sure that you put the team before the mission.
Help you out, brother Saad, is design the strategy to the team, not the team to the strategy.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And so I want to close out this section so we can move into the next section with Cassie about challenges and adaptability. One thing I will say before we move on, we are hearing the audience questions that are coming. We are cognizant of them. The questions that we are leading us through are going to address some of the questions that we're receiving, and we will have a specific Q&A period for the last 20 to 25 minutes of our program. So stay tuned. If you put a question in the chat, we're about to answer it shortly. Cassie.
All right. So I'll actually ask one of the audience questions going into overcoming challenges and adaptability. So this question is, how would you recommend that others find their passion?
So I can say how I did it. And it was actually, I wrote a Huffington Post article on this called YOLO, how I quit my job and still have student debt. But one of my friends who was a successful entrepreneur, he had an exit. He said a practice that he used was just, instead of working on your weaknesses, just focus on building around your strengths. So one of the advices he gave to me, which I did, was just talk to 10, 20 people closer to you and ask them what's the one thing that you're good at, right? And so for me, what that came back with was, Emeka, you set a goal, and you whenever you set a goal, you just do it, right? Whether it's, hey, you want to start a business, whether it's, hey, you wanted to get your MBA, you just achieve that. And I was like, great, but how do you build a business around setting goals? But then I looked around, you want to lose weight, there's Peloton. You want to get married, there's Match.com, right? So there's a ton of billion-dollar companies built on goal setting. For me, financial goals was something I always said. I was always good at saving money. By the time I was 25, I had saved $100,000, like taking home lunches, living at home with my parents, just investing in things like that. I always had that mindset. And so it was, okay, let me build a business around that, because that's my fallback. Like, that's I'll do this for free because I just enjoy doing it. And debt was just something that I was dealing with at the time. I was navigating through that, and I was setting these tools for myself, dollar cost averaging, interest arbitrage, and different sort of things to sort of build this for myself. And it was like, well, why don't I take this and make it accessible to other people? But it came from that first exercise of just reaching out to people who were close to me, my mom, my spouse, my close friends, and trying to synthesize what everybody said was the one thing that I was good at, and then just building on top of that.
Yeah, I would add to what are already some really great pieces of advice. See the world as your laboratory, and get as much exposure as you possibly can. Different people, different places, different ideas, informational interviews. People often see bad experiences as necessarily negative, but it's just as important to know what you don't like as to know what you do like, or to know what piece of it you liked and what piece of it you didn't like, so that now you're beginning to build a narrative as you build up your career. And I was probably, like many, very impatient earlier in my career, wanting to know what is the it. I didn't really find it until I was probably 30, where I really had a clear vision for like the intersection of my passion and my gifts. You know, passion, as we talked about, I describe as the things you're naturally drawn to do. And your gifts are the things I describe as what you're naturally able to do. And so I had a passion for selling. I sold candy, I sold toys, or I tried to sell toys. You know, I was that kid, lemonade, you know, so that was a passion, but I had a gift in engineering. You know, I took apart computers, put them back together, wrote software programs in middle school when everybody else was out there playing. So the passion of entrepreneurship and the gift of technology, now I'm a technology entrepreneur. And so, again, internships, conversations, exploration, experimentation, trial and error, failure and success are all your best teachers. And as long as you take the time to take the lesson from the experiences and refine your understanding of yourself and what it is that you love to do and what you're able to do.
Thank you so much for that. I really like that tidbit of see the world as your laboratory. I am going to make sure I write that down. But yes, I think that's a great mindset to have, and just having the spirit of experimentation. But Dr. Robinson, would you?
Oh, no, I had nothing to add to either of those things. That was great.
All right.
I want to piggyback off something that, because I think this is really important what Dr. Pinkett said, because I was that 23, 24-year-old, like super stressed, thinking like I had to make life decisions at 24, which right now seems laughable. But I remember sitting in an MD's office at Merrill Lynch, and I'm, you know, thinking I'm falling behind, right? At 24, 25. And he's like, Emeka, your 20s are about batting practice. Like, you can take as many swings at bats, and it's okay, as long as you're, to Dr. Pinkett's point, learning new things. Your 30s is about setting the foundation for your 40s and 50s, which is where you really start to scale things up. And it relaxed me a little bit, because it made me realize, like, I don't have to get it right immediately. Like Dr. Pinkett, I didn't start my first business until I was 31, right? So my 20s was really working for other people, serving others, really trying to crossing off things that I didn't like before figuring out, okay, here's something that I think I might be good at. So I think that's just an absolutely point to hit on is, I think in your 20s, just you can figure it out. You do not have to start immediately. It's working for other people, I think, is super important as well, or a good tool. For me, at least, it taught me how to work in a professional organization, how to handle emails, how to manage upwards, and you have 360 interviews and things that you just don't do at a startup initially. But having that structure before you build that and having that knowledge, I think, could be very helpful in getting scalability when you start a company.
Thank you for that point, Mr. Ogu. And I think that's a really a very poignant thing, especially for our generation, me and Assad's. I feel like oftentimes we feel like we need to be fully actualized people at the age of 25. And if we aren't, then we're failing. But oftentimes I feel like having that spirit of just trying and exploring your things that interest you and seeing where they take you. And if they don't, being able to have a resilient mindset and go back to the drawing board can be really fulfilling and kind of show you what kind of person that you are. So thank you so much for that tidbit. But going into this next section of overcoming challenges and adaptability, I feel like throughout this panel so far, we have made it quite clear that entrepreneurship isn't a bed of roses all of the time. It is going to be riddled with struggles, trials, and tribulations. And my first question would be, what was one of the first significant challenges your business faced, and how did you navigate through that challenge to overcome it?
So I talked about one of our first significant challenges, which was 9/11. And the crossroads that we came to, which led to the birth of BCT. But we weren't done. There was more to come. BCT Partners was founded 2002. 2004 was an economic downturn. 2008 was the housing crisis, housing boom, housing bust. Both which negatively affected us to the point of, to Emeka's comments earlier, layoffs, downsizing, office closures. Under the Obama administration, there were 2 government shutdowns. And under both shutdowns, we had a plethora of federal contracts, which led to furloughs, cash flow challenges. Reminds me of my other favorite acronym. I got 2. The other one is CFIMITYM, which is cash flow is more important than your mama. And I'm gonna tell you right now,
These
cash flow
acronyms.
is not more important than my mama, but it's a very close second. I love my mama. So all that to say, getting back to this idea of not just competitive advantage is temporary, but I don't care how high you're riding, you can find yourself riding real low, real fast, just because that's the nature of business. But again, at risk of being redundant with my last point, the point for us, I'm 50 now, I got the benefit of hindsight. I can say to our credit, from our ages of 20 and 21 until now 49 and 50, we learned the lessons from all those challenges. 9/11, don't get wed to a particular business model. 2004, got to be leaner and meaner. Too much overhead. We got to cut costs so that we don't have all this excess staff or excess resources. Government shutdowns, diversify your revenue. Don't just put it all into the bucket of federal. Go back into the private sector. We've learned every lesson from every challenge. It's made us stronger. It's made us wiser. And if there is such thing as a sustainable business, it's learning the lessons of your failure from the businesses that are dead and buried.
Mr. Ogu or Mr. Robertson, would you like to piggyback off of that?
So I think, everything Dr. Pinkett said is spot on. I think for us, I guess the biggest first challenge is so with People Joy, I had sold a business before that, so I was sort of riding off that high, and I had self-funded. You get to the point where you can no longer self-fund, and you have to go out and fundraise, or as DJ Khaled would say, secure the bag. And so for me, that was going out and fundraising. So one of our first investors was Newark Venture Partners, which actually works out of the Rutgers Business School building in Newark. And it's raising money is hard, right? Especially if you don't come from that type of environment, and your mom and dad can't cut you 25, 50K checks, right? And so I think that was the biggest challenge, because you get to a point where, especially if product market fit takes longer than expected, you have to raise outside capital to sustain, to build that team. And, you get to a certain age where you just can't live off of ramen noodles anymore. And that was the biggest challenge, right? But going out there and fundraising and going through those things, it teaches you what you're made of, and it's something that everybody has to go through. And we were able to do that, raise capital, use that to build more product, sell more company, sell companies, and sort of get that sustainable business piece. You're never out of it. I think we're always constantly raising capital, looking to continue to grow our business. But I would say that was the outside of product market fit. Money buys time, right? And so if you want to get product market fit, you need time. To have time, you need money. So that was, for me, the biggest first challenge, was getting those first investor checks in the door.
Thank you for all your responses. Dr. Robinson, were you going to say something? Or
No, I want us to keep going. I know there are more questions out there, so go ahead.
All right. So quickly, I'd like to ask, on the topic of COVID, fast forwarding to this pandemic that we're going through, what are some unique challenges that you've been facing within your business as a result of going through this last year and a half?
Yeah, I mean, the blessing of the journey of BCT, and this is kind of the epilogue to the story that we've been unfolding over the past hour and 15 minutes. Whereas every single societal circumstance I described to you before had a negative, if not significant negative effect on our businesses, COVID-19 and the murder of George Floyd, if I were to enter that into the conversation as well, has led to the most significant demand for BCT's services ever. Unprecedented. And I say that from the standpoint that our mission is to provide insights about diverse people that lead to equity. Those insights are powered by technology, by analytics, by machine learning, by AI, but equity is our end game. Let's be clear, it's who we are, it's what we do. And what are the two things we're talking about when we talk about COVID-19 and when we talk about the unrest of 2020? Equity. People are now searching for solutions for greater equity. How do we think about health equity in the midst of a pandemic? How do we think about social and racial equity in the midst of a racism pandemic? And the list continues. So we've never been more uniquely positioned as a result of the circumstances of COVID-19 and the murder of George Floyd, for people to now, in 2019, I was knocking on a lot of doors because I've been knocking on doors for a long time trying to get business. People are beating our door down right now at BCT. And our president, Lawrence Hibbert, our business partner of 28 years, 29 years, will tell you, we count that blessing, recognizing that we still have a responsibility, given all those who are challenged in this current environment, that if we are so blessed to be blessed as we are, we got to be a blessing to other people. And so we still maintain that root of trying to do well and do good. And that's what we'll always do.
Yeah, that's definitely interesting to hear. COVID has allowed for a lot more people to work remote. So that has been a plus for certain people who typically work in the office format. It has taken a toll for other people in terms of health and family dynamics, as well as business. So it's definitely interesting to see how it's given BCT partners an uptick. But Dr. Robinson, Mr. Ogo.
Well, I mean, I want to hear Emeka talk about people joy, but certainly COVID-19 had an effect, depending on what the type of company you had and what it was built upon. I mean, again, a company like BCT, and I suspect people joy as well. There's a lot of technology involved in delivering those services. You can have your people work remotely. They can still get their job done. It's not a restaurant. It wasn't something that was facing the public in a particular way or diversely affected by quarantines and the like. So BCT has done well in that regard. And but I do know that the end of the story for both these companies, these are multi-million-dollar companies that were built, and to have to be able to weather these storms is essential. You have to have a company that's flexible and able to pivot like that. So let's hear about People Joy.
Yeah, no, this it's been interesting from the standpoint of we sell a product that is focused on attracting and retaining talent. Well, last year, nobody was focused on attracting or retaining talent, right? And what Dr. Pinkett said earlier about sort of just building on different areas, just based on different challenges you're facing, we had enough where we had one product with the student loan repayment assistance platform, which at the time, companies were laying people off. It wasn't a benefit that they were looking at offering. On the flip side, we had launched this advisory service, which was employee paid. And during the pandemic, we had less than 2% churn, meaning the employees who were paying for our service did not cancel. And this is why this is important. This is what I mean by, like, you were asking what the unique selling proposition, and I said we go the extra mile. Here's when this matters. Everything shut down February 2020. In March of 2020, the Department of Education said if you have federal student loans, you no longer have to make payments on those student loans. All right. 93% of the 1.6 trillion is owed to the federal government, meaning that our clients, 93% of our clients, weren't making any payments. So why pay people joy? why use a service if I don't, it's not an existing problem to me right now? What's the value of it? And the value was a service that we bring long-term. They knew this was a marathon, not a sprint. So they said, I'm staying. I'm paying you, even though I'm not making payments on my student loan, because I see the value of this benefit longer term. And that helped us weather the storm. So now when companies are now in a major hiring cycle, and now to Dr. Pink's point about it's hot. Everybody's looking to attract and retain talent. We sell to a lot of hospitals. There's nursing shortages. They all have student debt. Everybody wants that solution. It allowed us to weather the storm, and now things have sort of bounced back for us. So it was definitely a challenging time, especially like we work with a lot of nonprofit institutions, hospitals, home health aides. So we had individuals, employees that caught COVID that were dying, right? We had to deal with the pain that our employers, our customers were dealing with. So it was definitely a tough time, but we were fortunate enough to be able to weather that and come out stronger on the other side.
For sure. And like we've talked about with entrepreneurship, the spirit of resilience needs to flow in constantly, and especially during this period in the pandemic, you really companies have to be able to pivot and look towards different ways of innovating within this new space of remote work, of trying to reach a new normal in order to thrive and survive. So thank you for that input, Asad.
Thank you, Cassie. We are now going to transfer into a little bit more of our audience questions. We have some that have been in the chat, as well as some specific ones that were prepared based on some Google Forms we put out for audience input. So the question we want to address first is that some entrepreneurs choose to use their assets to do things like send Captain Kirk into space. And this is going to touch on part of Dr. Pinkett's response to the last question. What do you see as the role of entrepreneurial businesses in social responsibility?
I guess let me start with that one. And maybe this needs to be the speed round, so I'll try to keep my comments brief. There's lots of folks who get into entrepreneurship because they want to make money. And to be honest, it's a hard way to go if that's your only reason and rationale. You've got a lot of obstacles to overcome, and if you're not passionate about what you're doing, you're going to be it's going to be hard for you to get up every morning and do this. Social responsibility is super important. For some of us, it is something we want to build into the business, right? That you can do well and do good at the same time. I teach a course called Social Entrepreneurship. And, there are people who want to create businesses where the centerpiece of what they do is solving a social problem. And that's great. It's not the only way to go. You could certainly do that as part of the business model. But the other way is to figure out how to use some of the profits, some of the money that's made to do good things. And that's what we call corporate social responsibility. And you can do good works. Your employees can do work on your behalf, volunteer places, and you can build that part into your business. So there's lots of ways to do it. And, again, the way I look at these things is, the old saying, to whom much is given, much is required. So if you're fortunate enough to build a great business, give back in some way. Figure out how to do that, whether you build it into the business model or whether these are things that you do, periodically to support the community.
Thank you, Dr. Robinson. Spider-Man says with great power comes great responsibility.
That's right.
I think it's something can apply in this avenue as well.
Absolutely.
Mr. Ogu, would you have anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think to me, social responsibility it's everyone's responsibility, whether you work in corporate, whether you're an entrepreneur. I think obviously we've all done things that are double bottom line that are impactful to us, but to Dr. Robertson's point, the Bill Gates model works just fine. Right? Bill Gates started off with Microsoft, and now he's got a foundation that has changed a ton of people's lives. He waited until after he became a billionaire to do that, and I think that works just as well, right? And so for me, I think it's as an entrepreneur, you're at its base level, you're creating jobs for other people. You're creating jobs for people to work and and feed their families and things like that. I mean, I think that's social responsibility in and of itself, right? Just being able to create for other people. But obviously, if you can, and I'm a firm believer in that. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing and being able to make the world a better place while making money. But there's also a benefit to things that don't have necessarily a social responsibility tilt immediately. But if you're able to build a successful business and then with that money, to Dr. Robinson's point, give back, that might be better. You might be distracted doing two things. Maybe it's better to just build that one big thing and then do it afterwards. So again, just my thoughts on it. Obviously, Dr. Robinson teaches a class on this, so he's probably got more insight than I do. But that's just my gut reaction to that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ogu. Dr. Pinkett, would you like to add anything to this conversation?
Nothing to add. Great points. We can move on. Speed round.
Yes. So I want to go into this next section of audience questions that are going to be touching on some particular professional insights from each of you. So we're going to start with Mr. Ogu. Mr. Ogu, one of our audience members asked about that there was a $700 billion bailout for financial institutions. And are any of these institutions holding student loan debts, and how many are buying up homes as predatory lenders?
I don't really know the answer to that question. I'll say, 93% of the debt is owed to the U.S. government. So Uncle Sam owns most of the debt. They're not going to, although there's thoughts that they will forgive it widespread. I'm bearish on that. Student debt isn't too big to fail, like some of the mortgage crisis was. So, so that's my thoughts there.
No problem. Thank you very much for your response. Next, we'll go to Dr. Robinson. Dr. Robinson, this question asks, what progress has been made since 2016 towards the integrated collaboration between social issues and shareholder profits? Of that progress, what are the gains and what challenges still remain?
Well, I don't know why 2016 is the date they posed, but there are certainly large-scale companies out there who are feeling the heat because the shareholders or some activist shareholders have asked them to change the way they do business. Whether that means investing in renewable energy or changing their practices or doing things to change the board members or the upper management. So, these things are happening for the largest companies. And of course, it makes a splash in the newspapers or online because we haven't asked these companies to do that, in the same level. So that's on the big end of the pool, or the deep end of the pool. But for the smaller companies, I'd say since 2010 or so, just having a social mission as part of what you do and integrating it into your strategy is something that people have been doing. They have done it, as social entrepreneurs. They've done it because they represent a younger generation who doesn't see a big chasm between doing well and doing good. They feel like they should be able to do all those things together, and there's a lot more support. There are different things that are on benefits, corporations, and all that are really important markers for the future. So, if somebody who's interested in learning more about that should definitely look up some of the movements like the Global Impact Investing Network or the Benefits Corporation, and you'll find plenty of information about how to integrate both of those into the same company.
Thank you very much, Dr. Robinson. And the last of our questions will go to Dr. Pinkett. An audience member asked, you stated, we are the canary in the coal mine. What's happening internationally to dismantle the, quote, 7 myths, unquote, of inequities and resources around the globe? And what of those transformations have been actualized?
Yes, so that was a reference to a video I produced, which is available on YouTube, the 7 myths of racial equity, where I dispelled some of the common myths that were lamented to me in the wake of George Floyd's murder. And I would answer the question to say that we're in the middle of a reckoning right here, right now. Where we're, and I'll say it more, with a little more flavor, which is this a moment or is this a movement? I don't think we know the answer to that because we're in the moment right now. Only when we'll have the benefit of hindsight, looking back on 2020 and 2021, will we know, did we really make the progress and realize the promise of all the calls for action and calls for equity that we're hearkening back to the summer of 2020? I can say this, that if we don't know the answer to the question of movement or moment, we know what the question that we need to be asking all of ourselves is, what are you doing? What are you doing? What you don't want is to look back on history and say you weren't part of trying to make the moment into a movement. And that begs the question for all of us, be we entrepreneurs or employees or otherwise. How do we bring our talents like entrepreneurs do? How do we bring our passions like entrepreneurs do? How do we bring vision like entrepreneurs do to solve the pressing societal problems that are plaguing all of us? And let's be clear, I'm not talking about the issues that face one of us, because what affects one of us affects all of us. And so we've gotten into this mess together. We got to get out of this mess together. And we're only going to do that by working together. And that's the spirit of this thing we've been calling entrepreneurship, is about bringing all that together to make a difference. So I challenge those who've tuned in today to do exactly that, make a difference.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pinkett. We have come to just about the end of our time together here tonight. I'm going to open the floor one last time to each of our panelists. They'd like to leave any closing remarks as we begin to wrap up this evening. Mr. Ogu.
Yeah, I'm just going to take a quote from the great Dean Brown, who I think if you don't know him, he's definitely a great person. He retired a couple years ago, but there's nothing you can't do with a Rutgers engineering degree, right? Like that's one thing I'll leave you with. There's nothing you can't do with a Rutgers engineering degree.
Yeah.
Dr. Robinson.
Like, thanks for having us today. I hope that we've encouraged a few entrepreneurs out there. Lots of resources at Rutgers for entrepreneurship, so take advantage of them, whether it's the I-4 program or learning about small business innovation research grants. Find out more about newer venture partners or entrepreneurship minor. I mean, we got business plan competitions. Don't wait. If you're a student right now, don't wait. If you're an alum, now's the time. We're testaments to that. And it's not the only thing you'll do in your life, but I'll tell you, I've talked to a lot of people who wish I would have at certain times in their lives. And it's because they didn't take advantage of the opportunity and the resources around them to do it. And you got it now, go for it.
Thank you. And to all the current Rutgers students, maybe take a class with Dr. Robinson, huh? And finally, Dr. Pinkett.
Brother Saad, you took the first words out of my mouth to say you've taken advantage of the resources, is taking advantage of Dr. Robinson. So if you're at Rutgers, you better holler at your boy. I'm talking about him, Dr. Robinson. He is a wealth of information and connection. He's a treasure at our State University of New Jersey on entrepreneurship and social impact. And if you haven't had the benefit of the blessing of studying at his feet, I invite and encourage you to do so. Along the same lines, I'd invite and encourage you to get a copy of my first book, because it was written for students that want to pursue entrepreneurship. Campus CEO, the Student Entrepreneur's Guide to Launching a Multi-million-dollar Business. I see you, Dr. Robinson. I'm gonna help you out. That is right there. That's right. Get you a copy of that, because if you wanted to ask me all I've learned about entrepreneurship as a student, it's right in here. So look no further. And last, I'll close on one of my favorite quotes of all time, which is that we are not meant to see through each other, but to see each other through. So let's work together across all of our differences and all of what makes us unique and different and passionate and beautiful and wonderful, and not see through each other. But in this world where so much is happening, let's just cover each other's back and see each other through, because that's what Rutgers engineers do.
Thank you very much to all our panelists. Cassie, any closing remarks?
Yes, of course. Thank you so much for all of your insights here today. I am so lucky to have been moderating with the wonderful Assad tonight. As an engineering student and an entrepreneurship minor, I can definitely attest to the fact that my entrepreneurship classes have taught me how to be a lot more business minded and be a lot more well rounded when it comes to going into corporate spaces or just in my life in general. So I haven't had the pleasure of taking a class underneath Dr. Robinson, but I'm so glad that I had the opportunity to speak with you all tonight. Thank you so much.
Excellent. And to just put a nice bow on things, we want to thank everyone who helped make this evening possible. That includes our amazing panelists sharing their wealth of knowledge. Our audience, thank you for joining us tonight. Hopefully the knowledge that was given out was well received. And if not, you know some people who you may be able to reach out and ask questions to in the future. And of course, thank everybody that's working very hard here on the team and the School of Engineering, Kendra, Sebastian, and Alex, who help us behind the scenes to make great events like these possible. Can't forget Mira as well. And thank you all for joining us this evening. We wish you great health and prosperity going forward. And we look forward to, in the future, hearing about successful entrepreneurial endeavors that will continue to come out of our Rutgers engineering community. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, and have a great evening.